while young people want to change the world. The problem is that that's been harnessed into attempts to change other people. But that isn't what you should do. If you want to change the world, you should change yourself. And I don't mean that in some cliched sense. I mean it in the sense that Alexander Solzhenitsyn said when he analyzed the Soviet Union. He said, don't be thinking that the line that divides good from evil runs down a political spectrum or countries or something like that. It runs down right down the middle of your soul. And if you want to sort out the world, then what you do is you sort yourself out. It's a serious business, right? They say it's more difficult to rule yourself than to rule a city. And that's the truth.
So I've been going through the self-authoring program. It's taken me a little bit longer than I expected, but I'm getting through it slowly. I continue to plug away at it. I've finished the present program, the virtues. I'm working through the faults, and I've also started on the past part of the self-authoring suite as well. So yeah, I mean, I think the greatest battle that we have to go through is the battle with ourselves. And as Jordan Peterson says, it's easier to rule a city than it is to rule yourself. And I think maybe the greatest adventure we go on is the adventure to try to understand ourselves and to try to work ourselves out and to find out how we fit in this reality, in this world. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the self-authoring suite, I'm just going to put up a little clip with Jordan Peterson speaking to Stefan Molyneux, because he goes through the entire self-authoring suite, the past program, the present with the virtues and the faults, and the future authoring program as well.
So let's say, well, you want to figure out where you want to go, and you need to figure out how do you get there. Well, the first thing you need to know, just like you do if you're in a car and you're trying to go somewhere, is, well, where the hell are you? And you might think you know, but you probably don't know, because you're fragmented and fractured by the unresolved issues in your past. And so you're kind of all over the place. You haven't got your act together. Things have fallen apart around you. And so the first thing you do is you have to call yourself together. And that's what the past authoring is for. So what we have people do is to go over their past and to break their life into 6 sections. We call them epochs. And then to identify the most significant, the most emotionally significant events of each of those epochs, and to write about them, and to write about why they happened and what they meant and what the value was and what might have been done differently. And to update yourself, to transform your implicit experience into explicit experience, and to update yourself. And so you do that with the past authoring exercise, and that's quite difficult. And the more undigested material you have that's related to the past, the more difficult that's going to be. And so I would recommend to people,
but let's mention that for a second, because I think people get so used to sort of the toothache of past pain that it almost blurs out in their mind. It's like that sound, the ringing, that eventually your brain stops processing. But I think you have a very good rule of thumb, which is the 18-month rule. And I wonder if you could help people understand that it is not a suffering that you have to take with you like a ball and chain for the rest of your life. There are ways to release it, but it does involve circling back and processing it through language.
Yes. Well, let's define what processing means. Okay. So, you know, let's say that you had a pretty painful history of being bullied when you were 13, and you're still carrying that with you. You carry it with you in your posture. You carry it with you in your assumptions about people. This is all implicit, right? It's not explicit. You carry it with you in the form of resentment and questions about what might have been. And you carry it with you because you've been demeaned by it. But you know, you're not 13 anymore. You're 40. And those experiences are not transferable in any simple manner to your current reality. So you go back and you think, okay, what happened? What exactly happened? And what happened means is, what were the causal pathways that put me in that position of vulnerability and inferiority? And you want to specify them as carefully as possible, because what the part of you that's hanging on to that wants to know is, have you changed enough so that that won't happen again? And if the answer to that is yes, even through thinking, you realize, well, I'm not that person anymore. Or you go back to the experience and you figure out, oh, this is what I did and I could stop doing that. Then the icy hands of that traumatic experience will release, that you will be released from it. Because what your mind wants to know, your unconscious mind, let's say, is, have you resolved this issue to the degree that it is unlikely that it will occur again? And that's what it means to have processed it.
And this, I think, is really important for people to understand, that memories stick until you gain security. Memories stick to alert you to dangers that you're recreating by avoiding the history. So if you were bullied, you're going to either end up usually in the bully victim paradigm, right? You're either going to go out there and say, well, I'm going to get them before they get me, or you're going to go out there with you sort of shuffling along, staring at the sidewalk, slumped shoulders, and you're going to be inviting more bullies into your life. And so until you figure out the causality of how you ended up being bullied, you're going to gravitate to either of those two poles as either a fight or flight mechanism. But if you go back and process and figure out, okay, here's the steps that happened that ended up with me being bullied. Now I know how to avoid the bullying situation. Then that pain will recede. It's there until you listen. It speaks until you're safe.
So there's this great scene in this documentary called Crumb, which is about the underground cartoonist Robert Crumb. It's the most brilliant documentary I've ever seen. And it's highly instructive, that documentary. It's about a terribly Oedipal family, but it's also about the successful struggle of one of the brothers in the family who became a famous underground cartoonist to free himself from that. And part of the documentary details his terrible experiences as a 13 to 17-year-old with women. And he was one of these people, Robert Crumb, who was not at the bottom of the dominance hierarchy. He was outside the dominance hierarchy in the land of absolute contempt. And he made this card when he was about 13 or 14 with a broken heart on it, and described his realization that he was such an outsider that he would never be successful with girls, or period, but particularly with girls. But then that freed him up, and he started to cartoon more and draw more and listen to old music, and he kind of developed his own pathway. And then he became a very successful illustrator, and then he became very successful with women. And so, but he drew this picture to illustrate what he was like when he was 13, and it's very self-critical, and he draws himself as kind of hunched over, thick glasses, really skinny, underdeveloped, weak chin, bad attitude, poorly presented, badly dressed, like a walking testament to resentment and weakness. And it wasn't until he realized that he was playing that part, and that was also fueling his rejection, was he really able to move towards overcoming it. And so partly what you want to do is to go over your past and figure out, okay, what stupid things did I do, or in what manner was I insufficient so that this negative destiny was more likely to visit me? Now, you don't assume that everything that happened to you was your fault or under your control, because everything isn't your fault and everything isn't under your control. But you do want to figure out, okay, well, if I played some hand in this and that could be rectified, well, then I should figure out how to rectify it, because then I won't be in this situation anymore. You talked about the bully victim who invites more bullying. It's like, well, if you've conducted yourself in a manner such that you've attracted the attention of bullies and you haven't stopped doing that, then you're still going to attract the attention of bullies. And so your mind is very alert to such things. It's always looking for where you're weak and vulnerable and warning you about it. And it's just an alarm bell, right? It isn't necessarily a problem-solving mechanism. And so alarm bells might be going off in your head all the time, and that's very unpleasant. But the difficult process of articulating it and thinking it through can free you from that. And so that's what the past authoring program is for. So that you might think of that as step one. Where am I, and can I get myself together where I stand? Okay. And then the next issue would be, well, who am I now? So you can do a personality analysis. That's the present authoring, which helps you identify your virtues and your faults. And your virtues are those tools that you have to deal with the world successfully. And your faults are the places where you fall short of your own vision, for that matter, right? And then the next step, and you can do these in any order, but the next step is, okay, where should you go? And one answer to that is, well, how about somewhere better? That's the land of milk and honey, right? Somewhere better. All right. So you ask yourself, well, what would better look like? I do this with my clients all the time. It's like, okay, you want your life to be better so that there's less suffering and waste and terror. Okay. Hypothetically, if you had what you needed to have the life that would be best for you, as if you were taking care of yourself, as if you mattered to yourself, as if you could grant yourself what you needed to thrive, what would that be? And then we get concrete. What do you want from your friends? How are you going to interact with your friends? How is it that you're going to set your family straight, or move from your family if that can't be done? How are you going to set up an intimate relationship? What are you going to do in your career? How are you going to educate yourself? How are you going to deal with drugs and alcohol and other temptations like that? What productive and meaningful activities are you going to engage in your spare time? What sort of person are you going to be 3 to 5 years down the road if you could be the sort of person that you would want to be? Well, that's the first set of questions in the future authoring program.
Right.
And the next question is, okay, you get to have what you need. It's 5 years from now. What does that look like? And then so that's your own heaven, right? It's like, let's detail out paradise as far as you're concerned. Be realistic about it. This isn't a game for children, right? This is real life. So you want to be realistic about it. So you detail out your vision of life more abundantly as far as you're concerned. This is only for you. You don't even have to tell anyone about it. And then we have people flip it. It's okay. Now we figured out what you want and what would be good for you. Let's play the game the other way. All right. Now you think of all your weaknesses and all your proclivity for malevolence and your resentment and your tendency to avoid and all your bad habits. And then you let that get the upper hand. And then that drives you into the ground over the next 3 to 5 years. What hell do you inhabit because everything's broken into pieces 3 to 5 years from now? And you really want to contemplate that, because then you have a hell to run away from and a heaven to run towards. And that makes you maximally motivated because your fear is behind you then, pushing you, instead of ahead of you, stopping you.
Right.
So, and then we ask people to make all of that into a detailed plan, a detailed implementable plan with fully articulated and rationalized.
So that gives you a pretty good overview of the self-authoring suite. And as I said, I've started with it, starting with the present authoring program, and I've made a little bit of a headway through the past authoring program as well. So hopefully that'll be all complete within a couple of months, and I'll give an update to let you know how that's been going. I found the virtues a little bit difficult to do, partly because the virtues I found were also faults depending on the situation. So I think we have we have our virtues and we have our faults, and it is figuring out how to use them depending on, how to use our virtues or how to make our faults our virtues, depending on what situation we're faced with. So I found that a little bit difficult, but it was good to get a wider view of myself. And I guess the self-authoring program helps you to view yourself in a more objective manner so that you get a wider perspective of your life and you can place yourself within it, and that helps you to figure out where you're going and how to get there. So that's one of the things I've discovered along the way. Also, I think it offers you a chance, it's offered me a chance for self-reflection, and I've recently been reading a book by Andrew Lobaczewski, Political Ponerology, and he talks about ideologies within society and how groups form around certain ideologies and how they can really degrade a society. They kind of infect a society, and we see these various groups today who have maybe started with a good cause. I'm not sure, but certainly today, such as feminism and the Black Lives Matter, and they have these ideologies which aren't based on any sacred truth, if I can put it that way. And it seems to cause society itself to degenerate. And Lobaczewski talks about this, and he talks about some ways that you can immunize yourself against these ideologies, because I don't think anyone is immune to falling for different ideologies. They can all wear a mask of virtue, and so how do we prevent ourselves from falling for different ideologies? And he mentions two things. The first is psychological knowledge, and the second is the capacity for self-reflection. So I've been busy getting more psychological knowledge, and it's good to do a program like this so that you can just have that chance to reflect on yourself. And I think ideologies are they're always outward focused. It's always the world is the problem, whereas when you stop to think about things, you realize the problem is more within than out there. So that's one of the things I've been thinking about along the way. Also, I think the program gives you a chance to take responsibility for your life. There's been a lot of talk these days about rights, privileges, and I think a right is, to me, it comes across as being very passive. It's what the world has to give to you. You have the right for this, you have the right to that, and it's a very passive thing. Whereas a responsibility is your active engagement with the world. So it's the way you act in the world. So yeah, I just wanted to share one last clip, and it's Jordan Peterson talking about responsibility and what happens when he discusses responsibility with other people. So thanks for listening. I'll leave you with Jordan Peterson. Stay tuned for the next video. Bye for now.
So here's the other thing that's really struck me, and I think this is of absolutely crucial importance, and I don't know how much importance, but it's certainly important to me. One of the things that has just blown me away in the last year, because I've talked to lots of people live, but also lots of people online. But it's more obvious live, and it's obvious in this theater as well, is that I've gone around and spoken, and a large proportion of my audience has been young men, under 30, something like that. And I've spoken to them a lot about responsibility. And what's so odd about this is that of all the things that I've spoken about, because I can see the audience and I can feel how the audience is reacting, because I'm always paying attention to all of you insofar as I can manage that. So I get some sense of how what I'm saying is landing, which you have to do if you're going to speak effectively to people. And what happens is if I talk about responsibility, is everyone is silent, just like they are now. Silent and not moving, right? Focusing, attentive. Say, pick up your responsibility. Pick up the heaviest thing you can and carry it. And the room goes quiet and everybody's eyes open. And I think, that always makes me break up. I don't know why. I was speaking to an English journalist today who was going to write an article in Spectator magazine, and I was talking about this, and at the same point in the discussion, I had the same emotional reaction. I don't really understand it. I think there's something about it that's so crucial, because we've been fed this unending diet of rights and freedoms, and there's something about that, there's something about that that's so pathologically wrong, and people are starving for the antidote, and the antidote is truth and responsibility, right? And it isn't because that's what you should do in some I know better or someone knows better for you what you should do sense. That's the secret to a meaningful life, and without a meaningful life, then all you have is suffering and nihilism and despair and all of that, and self-contempt, and that's not good. And so it's necessary for men to stand up and take responsibility, and they all know that and are starving for that message. And the message is more that that's also a good thing, to stand up and take responsibility, because you're cursed so much now from when you're young with this notion that your active engagement with the world is part of what is destroying and undermining the planet and adding to the tyranny of the social systems. It's like, how about not so much of that, hey? Because it's too soul deadening. It's anti-human right to the core. And my sense instead is that, if you were able to reveal the best of yourself to you in the world, that you would be an overwhelming force for good, and that whatever errors might be made along the way would wash out in the works. And that's the other thing that you see in the Abrahamic stories, because Abraham is not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination. He's a real person, and he makes mistakes, but it doesn't matter. The overarching narrative is, maintain your covenant with God, and despite your inadequacies, then not only will you prevail, but your descendants will prevail. It's like, great, that's really good news, So it's been really something to see that in the stories.